Welcome, everybody, to the In Pursuit podcast from Pathfinder. I'm Deon Garrett, and this podcast is all about trying to help you on your journey toward something I'm really passionate about, living a whole life, and all the various ways that we try to find that together. And then today, I've got the Zell family with me. This is Sean and Corrine. You all have done something, and this is a bit of a teaser, you all have done something that I'm kind of obsessed with. So this is exciting for me because I've heard part of your story and I want to know more about it. And it scratches into a bigger issue that we'll talk about in a minute. But first, before we say anything else, you, and it's not both of you, maybe it's just you, Sean, are your fellow cold plungers, or both of you?
I am. I am. And I'm recruiting all people that want to join me, including my family members and my little kids.
Everybody should try it. It doesn't mean you have to continue.
Yeah. So how long has this been a thing in your family?
I've done cold plunging for years.
Really?
I just bought one. Yeah. I had access to them in a previous life, but probably in the last like 3 or 4 months, I would say that it's been pretty religious, like daily. It gets colder. It gets harder when it's colder, but
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Not you.
I'll do it once in a while and to show my kids that like I can be brave, but I really don't like it. It's not my thing. But he loves it and it makes him better. So whatever, just do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I've been for about 6 months into it, and my wife. So for years I've been like learning about cold exposure and doing cold showers and doing Wim Hof breathing and some of those things, and loving whenever I can get into a natural body of cold water. Like if I'm hiking somewhere and there's water and it's cold, I'm like, I got to get in it. And is that him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I like it. Mentally, it's good for me, I think. So who knows? We'll probably find out in a couple of years that it's really bad for us. And then we'll be like those people that are like,
I know. I'm like, this could be terrible, but is it worse than most things that we do?
I feel like if you guys look forward to it, do it. But like, don't make those who don't want to do it every day. Don't make us feel bad if we don't want to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
That sound good.
Yeah. So in my house, it's me and my son, and it's gotten harder with weather getting colder. So my son Corbin, he loved it in the summer. Like, I mean, he was like every day he was so excited. And then now that it's winter, he's like, this isn't as fun.
When it's dark outside and you got to wake up and do it, you're like, getting from a warm bed to 45-degree water, it's tough. But a workout in between is kind of how I get there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, my wife thinks I'm crazy for cold plunging, but my family knows that I'm one of these people who I'm constantly, this is what this podcast is about. I'm constantly trying to figure out ways to live a fuller life, to find healing, to find wholeness. And there's enough of a nonconformist in me that says, maybe there's some practices out there that in modern life we're not paying attention to that we really should be. And so part of the crux of this conversation today that I want to talk to you about is, my theory on life increasingly is that the core of life that we're living is, I think we're kind of acknowledging that it's not very healthy. And so we're trying to find all these ways to put health around in the margins. So, like sitting in front of a computer screen all day, we're like, well, that's probably not good for you. It's bad for your posture. It's bad for your eyes. And so we're like, well, let's do a standing desk, or, let's find ways to modify this thing that feels unhealthy as a core. Or if you're sitting all day, then you better hit the gym at the end of the day. Or if you're in controlled environments all day long, then maybe if we don't experience the seasons, maybe you got to do a cold plunge. And so it feels like there was this way of life at one point in time where health was just kind of baked into the way you lived life. And now we're like, the core way that we live life isn't healthy at all. And we have to find all these ways to import health in around the margins of life.
Did you guys talk before we met? Because I feel like these are conversations that we have all the time. He starts them though. He's like you. It's like, what can I add in? What's the next thing that I can do to center myself? And
Yeah, I said the word sauna to her and she's like, nope.
No, that's the whole conversation in my house over the last 3 months.
And the thing about it, and like when we get into this is like, I get an idea in my head and I just keep talking about it and I keep talking about it and I keep talking about it. And, bless her heart, she looks at me and she's like, okay, fine, I'm sick of hearing about it. Like, let's just do it. And that's,
It's kind of what happened with what you're about to ask us about too.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's it. So the for me the crux of this conversation is I'm always wondering in my mind, I'm doing these incremental things, and okay, it's been cold plunging for the last 6 months, and my wife, she's looking at me and she's like, "What else are you going to try to fit into your day? You already are, you do your personal growth, your spiritual growth, you're meditating, you're cold plunging, you're working out, you're like." She's like, at some point you run out of time. What are you doing? And that's my exact thought is there some point in life where you just have to go more drastic? This incremental stuff where you're like, I'm trying to incrementally push back against parts of modern life that maybe aren't healthy, or I'm trying to find ways to grow and heal. Is there some point where you just got to take a quantum leap and go, I'm about to do something really, really crazy? And so in our situation in life, our son Corbin is, he's got about 2 years left of high school, and then our kids will be presumably moving out into other parts of their life. And so I'm like, oh, is that the time where we do something that's pretty countercultural to try to get to a different way of living that just feels more healthy or whole? And so when I heard your story, and Sean, we have not had much conversation about this at all. Corinne, you've volunteered here, and so you and I have had some just quick conversations around. But when I heard that a few years ago, y'all did something, you took that quantum leap and did something pretty drastic. I was like, I gotta know more about this and know more about what that journey was like for you. So you want to tell us a little bit about, and I don't know who wants to go first, but who?
I think he's being polite though. He's like, this drastic thing. I mean, people call this crazy, like 100%. We know, like we tell people this to this day, and they're either this is cool, or they're like, you guys are crazy.
Yeah, I mean, when we tell people what we've done or did, they look at us and there's 2 responses, and there's only 2 responses. The first response is, oh my gosh, I've always dreamed of doing that. And then the other response is, I wouldn't do, no way, you guys are crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just tell you that I'm really, for the sake of my marriage, I'm hoping today you talk me out of this, because depending how this conversation goes.
Well, it was his idea.
What's interesting is once we took that leap, we found out that it was much more common.
Yeah.
Much more common. But I think we aren't exposed to those pockets that we're exposed to just our pockets of the world. And so we don't know what other people are doing unless you're seeking that out. And then, as social media and all these other places have done, is once you're in that world, it all comes around you. You're like, oh my gosh, so many people are doing this. So
where do we go back to? Like 2019, 2020?
I would say 2020.
It's the summer of 2020 when...
I mean, it happened before that, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I feel like that's when we started talking about it, because that's when COVID happened, right? That's kind of when this idea came to mind of just making a change. So I feel like it was your idea, so you should start. Like, you're the one that was just saying, let's do this. Let's just make a life change.
So let's set the stage. Let's set the stage. You have, you're making a life change. What does your life look like at the time? You got kids, you got
so you
pets,
go first.
You got careers.
So he was working in professional sports, and I was working in the news business. So we were both working all the time.
Between the two of us, we were working the enough hours for 4 people. I mean, you're talking 60 to 70 hours a week. I was working, 80 to 90 hours a week, to the point where physically it was dangerous. Just because, you get up at 5:30, you're in at work at 6, and then you work until 11:30 at night, and then you jump on a plane the next morning. I mean, it was fun when you were 20, but once you start having a family.
Yeah, I mean, it's how we met each other. We worked hard to get where we were in our careers.
Yeah.
So for a long time, it was awesome. And then we had our daughter in 2018. And that's when it started to shift, I think, for both of us, if we were being really honest. Like, I still loved what I was doing. I worked all different kinds of shifts. So sometimes that would mean if you're going to anchor in the morning, you're going to be at work at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
If you're going to do the evening news, you're going to be there until 11:30, sometimes later if you're covering a story an hour away. I mean, it was just always, there's breaking news, you're there forever. And
pre-kids, we would have our date nights at like 10:30 at night.
Yeah, it was fun.
Once we both got off work.
Yeah, what taco place is open right now?
Right, which I think, both of you had pretty enviable careers. I mean, if I would look at your careers, I'd be like, oh, that's cool.
They were cool.
That's. It took some work to get there.
Jobs. We had both hit points, and I had hit a point where it was like, okay, I can do this same job for the next 20 to 30 years. The path forward, you know, similar to you, I'm always looking at like, okay, a growth mindset. Like how am I better today than I was yesterday? Whether that's, you know, in your career or personal or faith, whatever it is. And I looked at it for a while and I was like, gosh, like, I don't know if that's the road I want to keep doing.
And it took a while for us to get to that point then,
Yeah.
because it was started when we had our daughter, and then we'd realize we were missing out on things. You know, we did not have family. I think that's important to say as well. Like when we were living up in Wisconsin, we didn't have anybody immediately there. So, you know, you have a kid and something happens, then you call grandma or grandpa to come and help, or a brother or sister, anybody. We did not have anybody. And so it was relying on daycares and sometimes a neighbor or something, but it was very difficult. So then we started, you know, you wake up, your kid's sick. We both have huge things to do at work that day. What do you do? And that's where, for me, I remember it just starting to be like, ugh.
Yeah.
But I loved my station. And even after we had our second child in February of 2020, and I was on maternity leave, like they were still like, oh, it's going to be good. COVID happens, right? They're like, we'll accommodate you. We'll make it work. So even then I was thinking, oh, I can do this. Like I can have it all. I can have the big job and I can work all the hours and still be an awesome mom to my two little kids. They were less than 2 years apart at this point. But I feel like I just remember him starting to say like, why are we doing this? Like we're just working so hard and you know, COVID happens and we were in careers that still kept going.
Yeah.
And so we were like, well, what do we do with our kids? And he was leaving us to go take care of other people and not us. And that's when I remember you saying, why don't we do that RV thing that we've been joking about for years?
But like even years before that, we would sit outside in the backyard around the fire pit. And I'm like, you know, wouldn't it be cool if we just like sold everything, took a year off, and just traveled? And we still talk about this. She went inside with my mom. They were visiting at the time, and she's like, "You're not really going to do that." She goes,
my mother-in-law said that to me.
She goes, "Oh, PJ, you just have to let him talk about things. They're never going to come to fruition. It's just like, you just got to let him talk about it."
Smile.
Yeah, what you resist persists. What you fight, you strengthen. That whole Jungian thing.
He's
so you
a
just
dreamer.
gotta let it go.
You know, I like that about him. So I'm like, it's fine. Like I'm just letting him talk about it. But then it was like, wait a second.
Well, and then we started talking about it. And before you knew it, like we had traded 2 cars in for one big, huge truck. We had bought an RV. We had put our house up for sale. We had sold everything. And like the wheels were in motion.
Is this like Facebook Marketplace selling everything, or how are you selling everything?
A lot of it because it was still the very beginning of COVID when people didn't even want to like touch something that the other person.
Yeah. Right.
So
I mean, washing their groceries.
Yes.
And,
So I mean, it was tricky, but it was also when people were like buying things on Facebook Marketplace, if you remember that too, because they didn't want to go to stores. But I think he had to convince me more because I was still loving my job, where he was seeing it draining him. And I was like, wait.
Yeah, her job was much more additive and like mine was much more subtractive. And, you know, you said we had the cool jobs. Like I always tell people it's really cool that we had the fun jobs early on.
Yeah.
I'm never going to wake up in 5 years and be like, I wonder what it'd be like to like open up a cupcake shop. Like I've done it. I've done the crazy cool job. I have so much more appreciation.
He was a chef and dietitian for professional sports, by the way. I don't even think we said that. He worked in the NFL and then the NBA, and he was like he's not going to brag about himself, so I will, but he started a lot of programs that now are like implemented across leagues.
I didn't know if he had like an NDA. He wasn't allowed to talk about any of this stuff.
No, I mean, you know, we don't have to get specific on stuff, but there might be.
Yeah, but I mean, that's so cool. Like for most guys are like, oh, if I could work in professional sports.
But I always tell people, you know, free Gatorade and cool Nike shoes doesn't replace being absent as a father on Saturday morning. Like I was getting up, or I was in, you know, I'll never forget, like after our daughter was born, we were in the playoffs and I was in Boston and Toronto and I'm staying at Four Seasons and Ritz-Carlton's, and I'm calling back and she's like, oh, well, you know, it's snowing here. Like I'm trying to figure out with work. I'm like, gosh, like this isn't it.
Yeah.
You know, like it's just.
And I never resented him because early on we committed to these jobs and this lifestyle that we were in. But I do remember on a Saturday morning, like holding my baby and looking out our window and seeing our neighbors walk by and take a walk as a family. And I remember thinking like, oh, like I don't even know what that's like.
We didn't go to like there was so many weddings that were missed. Like people would be like, hey, what's your address? I'm like, if it's in the fall, I can't be there. It wouldn't even get past that. So
just started to eat at us. So I feel like Sean's persistence of talking about, hey, let's just make this change and sell everything and live in an RV. All of a sudden it was like,
Yeah.
could I do this? Like, could I really do this with a baby and a toddler?
and COVID, I mean, you know,
Pushed us.
everybody had something happen to them in COVID. You know,
Right.
whether it was like they put in a pool or like there was big things that we all did because we were trying to keep control of our lives.
Yeah.
And I think for us, we were like, well, you know what? Like, it's an opportunity. Let's just do it. The world's upside down and chaotic anyways. If we're going to make, you know, I was looking at different transitional moves to different teams and I was like, but it's just going to be the same thing right now.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm just going to be in a different city doing the same thing and we're going to be right back to where we were.
Yeah.
And I think both of us always were up for change. Like if you just looked
on
at
the
our lives,
change
like him and I, we didn't
aversion
go to
versus-
college,
yeah.
you know, where most of our friends went to college, or after college, we didn't stay in areas. Like we were always kind of going and doing, and we seek that out to an extent, I think. So, I mean, when we told our parents, I think mine kind of laughed, I think at first,
Yeah.
but and I was not a camper at all. Like
So that was going to be my
Yeah.
other question is,
Yeah.
so I have these conversations with Jocelyn, my wife, and we've been camping. I mean, in the totality of our relationship, including dating, I think we've been camping like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And we've been in an RV, I think, once or twice. And so for us, and some of this is like, we didn't do it when our kids were young because that felt overwhelming and we didn't have all the gear. And then we tried it once when our kids were not young.
We've got all those stories too.
And they were they didn't know how to do anything and they were a nightmare and they were fighting and they were bored. And we're like, oh, we started too late with them. So we're like, we'll wait until they're done.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm talking about going to living in an RV or rehab an old school bus or something, when I'm talking about that, I'm like, we haven't even done this this isn't our primary, like vacation hobby or something.
and
This
it
is just
wasn't
like,
ours.
so that's what I'm curious about for y'all.
I mean,
But
I
kind
grew
of.
up. So my
You grew up that way.
grandparents were big RVers, and they were the ones that like would go to Montana for 3 months and host. So like every summer when we were younger, we would go and camp in their RV with them. And then my parents had an RV, and I was always a big camper. I went to school out in Denver. You know, backpacking was a big part of my life. It's still a big part of my life. So that desire to like put everything that you need on your back or in the back of a car or in the back of an RV and just go. Like and you know, we talked about these high pressure jobs. Every summer before we met, I would go and take a week where I would be like completely off the grid. I had a friend out in Colorado. We'd, you know, go backpacking for a week and I was unreachable. And I came back such a better person because I removed everything.
Yeah.
So I think that's a bit of where it came from.
And my dad did that. So my dad was a hardcore backpacker,
Okay.
like Sean is.
Yeah.
But I can only remember him taking my mom and I out like tent camping a handful of times. And it was fun, but it wasn't like our thing
Yeah,
by any
it probably
means.
wasn't as fun for him either. He was like, oh, I got to
Gotta
deal
do all
with these
the
other
work.
people and do all this work. And
But I, remember going hiking and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then I met him and I actually loved that he was a backpacker and liked to do that. And we had done it a couple times. We went camping once as a couple and, we got outdoors, but it wasn't like I had any desire
yeah.
to do anything with an RV. We rented one time, and I was pregnant and we drove all
She
over
was
the
miserable.
place. And
You
I
were
was
up in
pretty miserable.
Michigan.
I was nauseous.
I had a
But,
great time. It was awesome.
And I agreed to it. But it wasn't the greatest experience. The bathroom thing's weird. I still don't understand the tubes and, all that
It is a
stuff.
little confusing.
So once I convinced her, then she looked at me and she said, if you're going to do this, then we need
I mean, you do it right.
we're going to do it right. And so I'm a researcher and I look through, we're looking at motorhomes and cars and trying to figure out financially, how could we do it, but also logistically, how we do it. I'm a big logistics, process
And I think
types
that's
of person.
important because a lot of people will do this and they think I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. We're going to make this lifestyle change. When Sean and I decided to live in an RV, we were like, let's give ourselves a year or we're going to set this money aside in which if it runs up, we're going to make a decision. We'll be done. So we knew we want to do this. We want to get the most out of it, but we don't want to be working because people that do this forever obviously have to find jobs that they are doing while they're traveling. And we were, I think, rare in the sense that we were like, we're going to give ourselves a year and this budget, and then we'll figure out what we want to do after that. But we need this time.
So for you, it was not like, hey, this is not a permanent lifestyle change. This is more like we need this sabbatical.
I didn't think
Do you think we were going to do it forever? Was there
No, I knew that we weren't
doing
doing it.
Or did you think it'd be like a reset? Like we're going to reset and we're going to re-engage in life differently when we get done, or we're just going to bounce right back to high pressure careers?
I put aside what I thought I needed for a down payment on a house, and then I budgeted out 12 months. And I said, in 12 months, we're either going to figure out where we're going to be, what we're going to do, what the changes are going to be, or where we're going to end up.
But we did not know.
But we didn't know because I was
questions?
still exploring job opportunities while we were on the road. And every time I looked at her, I'm like, gosh, like this, if you could draw your perfect job in that industry, I couldn't do it. I looked at her one day and I was like, I can't do it. It would just be, I don't know what I would want to do.
We didn't know what we wanted to do. We didn't know where we wanted to be. We didn't know whose job we were going to follow. You know, we didn't know anything. I feel like the only thing we knew setting out was that we wanted to be together. Him and I, our 2 kids, and we decided to take our Australian Shepherd with us too, which if you know anything about dogs, they're really crazy. So
we were going to be lifestyle bloggers. We didn't do anything.
We were going to
I bought a drone, and the thing with drones is you can't fly them where it's cool, and where you can fly them, it's not cool.
Yeah.
Like
but then it wasn't fun.
It wasn't fun. It was subtractive. So we took the mindset of like whatever is additive and subtractive. So like is blogging and social media posting and everything else, is that additive or subtractive to our experience? And it ended up being subtractive, so we just didn't do it.
Yeah.
And
so were there lots of things where you were of different opinions about what was additive and subtractive? Because I think that's the other thing is like when you're trying to balance different people in the experience.
Well, the thing that had to be like, we were looking at all these RVs and she was like, I'm not living in that one, or I'm not living. And I kept going and going and going. So we found one.
And I feel like I'm not like snotty.
No, not at all.
Some of them were
It was just like, I mean, RVs are brown and like just old and like
you're like this is not like a weekend at the in the woods. This is where we're living.
And we needed a nursery. Like we had a baby in a crib,
right?
And then we had a toddler, so we needed a situation where this kid wasn't going to roll out of bed. Like normal RVs, like the beds are little for the kids. So,
and when we say RV, it was 42 feet long. Everybody had their own bedrooms. I gutted the inside of it, made it look as best I could of Chip and Joanna Gaines with the whites and the cabinets. By the way, I'll never paint cabinets. Like the amount of work that I spent. And as leading my family into this, I remember being in this RV in the middle of June, painting and scrubbing and stripping this. I probably lost like half my body weight, making sure that it was as perfect as I could make it, because I knew that I was going to take my family out in this year-long journey. So
the weight was definitely more on Sean's shoulders as we were preparing. Like, I feel like he was like, okay, I finally convinced Corrine. I got to know how to do everything, because I didn't have any experience.
And so was that process fun? I mean, you just talked about like, it was kind of don't paint cabinets, but otherwise,
it was fun because like
sounds fun, but was the weight of it?
I mean, I tell people this all the time because they ask about this trip. The highs were really high and the lows were really low. And, there were things that went along the way that I'll remember forever. And there's things that you try to forget. I mean, having police officers tell me like, you can't park here while you're painting. Like I was bouncing around this West County area.
Yeah, we came here. So I think that's a big important part of it too. Once we sold our house super quickly
and I was still working because the team was in the bubble down in Orlando.
Yeah.
And so we were here doing this RV, still working.
So we lived at his parents' house for a summer when we were getting ready, basically. And this is nothing against my in-laws. I actually love my in-laws and we have a great relationship with them. But for me, that was actually the hardest part, looking back.
Yeah.
It was the transition from leaving our life in Wisconsin and then coming here and having this like limbo period before we actually started on our journey.
And there was a lot of delays.
There's a lot of delays.
Oh, this is broken, or this needs to get fixed, or like the tires need to be done. So like we had this like, we're going to set out when it's warm. We didn't leave St. Louis until Thanksgiving.
I had 2 kids. All of a sudden I became a stay-at-home mom overnight.
Yeah.
I had nothing else occupying my brain except trying to take care of 2 little kids in a home that wasn't mine.
Yeah.
Not childproof.
Yeah. Yeah. We did that we're just with one kid, lived with my wife's parents for a few
And we're
months
so
while we were waiting for
grateful
housing. And it was
for it.
awesome. It was
It was
awesome. They're so
amazing.
generous. We love them, but it was hard. It's hard to parent.
And they'd
It's
say
hard
the same
to
thing.
be in another space.
Yes. And looking back at it, like it's crazy. In the time I knew it was hard, but when we look back at the whole journey, I say to him, I think for me, that was like,
It was very, very hard,
slow.
but we couldn't have done it if we didn't do it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Right.
mean,
And that's like,
was
I think
necessary.
when you talk to people that are like, oh, I would love to do that, it's not easy. It's hard. And like a lot of
This is
people,
good. I need to hear this.
you know,
Like
well,
health
I mean, a lot of
insurance,
people,
everything,
well, yeah,
these
like
little
figuring
crazy
out,
details.
figuring out
Like-
going from like 2 full-time jobs to like now you have no jobs, no health insurance. You're like, well, how do you figure that out?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I spent a month trying to figure out how to cover health insurance for a family traveling from state to state all over the country. And, you know, a 3-year-old and 1-year-old still need shots. They still need doctor's appointments. Like, so there were a lot of details that had to be ironed out before we could even hit the road and have fun.
And it just kept feeling like roadblocks. It kept feeling like, oh, there's something else. But I will say in that whole time, it never was like, we shouldn't do this. I feel like we just I knew, okay, we just have to keep going forward. I have to trust my husband and I have to trust God. Like this is a decision we made. Our parents, both of our sets of parents were like fully supportive. They got it. They understood what lifestyle we were coming out of. And I feel like because they kind of were pushing us to at that point and they were willing to help us get to the point we needed to leave with helping with the kids or whatever. I think that we never were like, we can't do this in that moment.
And how did you prevent from like spiritualizing the roadblocks to be like, this is God telling us not to do this. This is going to be a
the
big
doors
mistake.
kept opening. So that was it.
So
It
there
would
were
be like-
there were roadblocks, but it didn't feel like there was like dead ends.
Right. I think that's a really good way to put it. I think there would be a problem and
I never give up.
he never gives up. I mean, that's being really honest. He doesn't give up. I would have, but I feel like I had him saying, okay, I'm going to do this. And then it was like a door would open and be like, okay, well, this is what we're supposed to do. And let me tell you, it didn't all go the way we thought it was going to go, but the doors did continue to open and we just kept walking. We
So
just
Sean,
kept going.
you don't give up because you're just stubborn and hard-headed, or you were just that convinced of like, no, this is something we should do. I want to do. We need.
I mean,
to
I've
do this.
always had like, you know, going back to like what I did for a living before that, I built things and I built things from the ground, like from nothing, you know, like when I started working for the Rams, I got like a racquetball court full of junk from like 30 years and like, okay, build a nutrition program. So like I was used to starting from nothing and like overcoming all of those different things to build something. And so for me, I was building this thing and I knew that like, okay, that's, you know, 1 knockdown, 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. Like, and it's not even the stubbornness of it, is that I could see the vision
Okay.
to her point. And
I think we had to remind each other like, okay, let's remember why we're doing this too.
Yeah.
And we kept doing that throughout that summer as we were preparing for the journey, the adventure. I think there was a lot of, okay, we're doing this because this is where we were. This is not where we want to be again. So we knew we needed to make a change at that point, and there was no turning back.
Yeah, and the reason I dive into that, because I think that's important, you know, as we're trying to, like, we talk about the vocational life here as a big aspect of our life, and, you know, that includes our work, if we have a career, but it's just all the callings that we have to balance in life. And how do you honor those callings? How do you steward those callings? How do you create within those callings? And so like in the vocational life, in the battle to figure out like, how do I bring all this together? I have one life, and how do I put all these things together? It's you get these confusing questions about where do I want to live or where do I want to work? And I think sometimes it can be really hard, or it can be, you're asking for God's guidance and you're saying like, what do we do? And then you're kind of, for me, I'm a tea leaf reader. So I see anything and I'm like, oh, does that mean something? And I don't necessarily react to it, but I stop and I look and I'm like, does that mean something? Does that mean something? And so, as you guys are talking through your story of just the different challenges or obstacles, on one hand, you can just be so hard-headed, like, this is what I'm going to do. And I don't care what God or anyone else says. And that's kind of like the stubbornness thing. Or you can have such a compelling vision of, we know the life we were doing is not, we're clear that wasn't working for us, and that's not what we want. And we're clear we need this break. And so we're going to pursue this because God will continue to make things clear. And I think it's really hard in life as you're trying to make a corrective decision, especially for something that feels healthier.
You know, though, I think after all this, we're better at it. We're better at, I think I am, I think you would say you are, being able to have more of a, okay, this is God telling us to do something or stop, whether it's walking through the doors or stopping. I feel like because we were able to take a step back and have this experience, it is a little bit easier for some reason to recognize it now.
Yeah. I mean, and there were so many things too, once we actually hit the road and we were doing the thing that we had set out to do, where things changed. And all these like we had to change our plans.
Change well either. You can say it. Like, I'm the one I'm like, really? Like, this is what I thought we were going to do. I don't want to do that. Like, you told me we were going
like
this
an example,
way.
like we were out in California. We were in Palm Springs in
Did
January.
you like
December,
Palm
January.
Springs?
What?
Do you like Palm Springs?
We did.
We did.
We had a good
I
experience
think it's
there.
super weird.
It is kind of weird, but I think that's maybe why
We were
Kind of like, what is
we were
this?
swimming in
Why-
January.
Why
It was
is this place? Like,
Yeah, it is. But we were out there and COVID shut down everything.
It was like another. It was
Because we had this, you have to book all this stuff like months in advance.
Because
So
remember,
like,
because it's not just him and I pulling up to RV parks. Because we're with little kids, you have to go to certain places.
Yeah.
We have to have.
and it was all planned out.
hookups
We had it
and-
all planned all the way up to, we were going to go out to California. We were going to go through wine country. We were going to go through Oregon, Washington, and do like, all the stuff that everybody, dreams of doing out west. And then COVID shut down everything.
And the fires.
And
Remember, it
well,
was like
that was
a double
after.
whammy.
So that was after. So when we started, we were going to go to LA the next day, and we were staying at some place in LA, and they were like, "Sorry, we're closed." I'm like, "Okay, we'll go to the next place." Sorry, we're closed. No exhibit, and like all the way up through, we would have had nowhere to stay all the way through San Francisco, and it's like, all right, we're changing, and that's where she says, in my mind, I was already on the East Coast, like, and she's like, "No, we can't do this." I'm like, "We've got to. You can't just, you can't stop. You just have to keep going forward." So I like booked everything across. We got from Palm Springs to San Antonio in 5 days, which is hard.
Yeah, when you're pulling a fifth wheel.
Yeah, when you're pulling a fifth wheel. And we had all of these things happen to us. We got to Texas and we're like, okay, we're trying to get to Florida because we knew that Florida was going to be open and everything was going to be going down there. So we got to Texas. And then the week after we left Texas, you remember that deep freeze that destroyed that state? We left 4 days prior to that happening. Mm-hmm. But if LA wouldn't have shut down. So all these occurrences started happening. And then there was fires out west. And we're like, well, geez, we're glad we're not out west.
yeah.
And then we got to Florida and COVID was happening. But like we got all of the things that we needed in Florida because everything was open. And the kids we were able to get vaccines. And I was talking to my parents, like we were on a wait list for 3 months. So like all of these things happened along the way. And, we were talking about this because she can never remember it. And whether, you look as it's God is in control of all of this. A lot of people can resonate with that really well. And then the other part of it that I had read when we were on the road, and we kind of use this as like a fallback, is there's a Chinese horse proverb. And do you know it?
I think I do.
So it's basically saying, if you're reading tea leaves, you know this one.
Yeah.
It's basically saying that you have no idea that something happens to you today, how it's going to impact your life tomorrow and the future.
Is this a good thing or a bad thing? And we're so quick to try to claim it.
So
like, this is terrible or this is awesome.
Yes. And so,
you're like, well, wait and
however
see.
you balance that, it's like you don't know. And we would say, well, man, if we were up in Oregon right now, we'd be abandoning an RV because it's on fire. Or like, if we were in Texas right now, we'd be trying to find propane and we'd be freezing it. So all of these things happened along the way that were like, yeah, you know what? It's somebody, God's looking out for us. Like there are things that are in play here that are outside of our control. And this has been a gift to us. And we are going to fully relish this gift.
Yeah.
I love it.
So, yeah. And I still use that. I mean, I had a friend call me the other day and he was like, yeah, we downsized our company. I'm like, I can't say sorry to you. In that moment, and he's like, I know I've given this speech before, but like, you just don't know.
That's right.
Until you can look back on it and be like, man.
I know, and it feels like it's not denying the uncertainty and how anxiety producing uncertainty can be, or just like the difficulty of loss and grief with a job or anything else. But there is increasingly in my life, I realize like we spend so much time trying to diagnose whether something is a good thing or a bad thing. I've even said that I think, one of the ways to read Genesis 3 with the knowledge of good and evil is just this human desire to be like, oh, I get to label the thing good or evil. And the very desire to do that is flawed. that it's at the end of the day, who knows? God gets to decide. And if we're his people, then we actually have the promise that even the most painful things he can use for our good. So we can't even call those things bad exactly.
And in the moment, it was not always easy to see that.
No.
But it is unbelievable when we look back at that whole time and everything we did, how God's hand was on it.
Totally.
The entire time. Pushing us to this area or that area, or helping us find the repair guy. And that is like, there's not
things
supposed
broke
to be
all the
anybody.
time, by the way. Like, I'm an expert in slides, propane, electrical, plumbing, like all those things break. And, that was part of it. So it's not easy. Like, if you are not handy with tools or good at trying to solve problems, like RVing is not for you.
Yeah.
Because something is always broken.
Yeah.
But it was the time. Like, I look back on that and I think about the time I got with my kids and my family. Like, I got to be with my kids every single day.
Yeah.
And whether it was just going to Walmart or if it was going to a playground or whatever it was, like, the relationship that I think I have with my older daughter was cemented so much more because we took that trip and her and I were together so often. Because
And you were appreciating the time, though. I feel like we knew what it was like to not always be around.
Yeah.
And so I feel like Sean was able to be like, oh my goodness, like the time with my kids.
And we still did all the stuff on the road. Birthdays were still special, and we did Christmas in
Arizona.
Mm-hmm. And, life was normal, but like in a different place every 2 weeks.
So how long were you on the road, and what ended it? You said you had a set time, or you're going to run out of time or run out of money or something.
So it's 10 months, and
10 months on the road.
Yep.
So that doesn't count the time here in St. Louis getting ready? That was
was like our journey.
Yeah. So we went to California, scrambled back across the country, went down to the Keys for a month. We have some family down there.
Oh, wow.
Imagine calling some family and be like, I'm going to put my RV in your front yard.
They were cool with it.
They were great with it.
Great.
And then we started working our way up through, Savannah and Georgia and everything else. And then we got to the Carolinas, and I Forrest Gumped it. I was like, I'm kind of tired now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm ready to go. And I had started talking to my mom about coming back here and working in the family business, and finding that I really just wanted to help people. And so we had started talking about that, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 months in.
I don't know. What I remember about that is the shift of him, all these different teams kind of reaching out, and him reaching out to teams, and it being this like, should I do it? Should we do it? And then all of a sudden him just saying, I think I have an answer for me, and that I should not be in professional sports anymore. Like, I remember that moment on the road when you made that decision. And then it was like, okay, if I'm not going to do this, what could I do? What do I want to do, though? It wasn't like, how am I going to pay the bills? At this point, we weren't there yet. It was like, what do I want to do with the rest of my, career path? Which I remember being so cool, because I always thought, if he decides he wants to go to some town and that's going to be where he wants to settle and continue his career, I knew that I would be okay with it. And that's something when we started on the road. When
we first met, I almost moved us to a tiny,
I would not have said that years
We would have
before.
gone to Tuscaloosa, and it was like we had just started dating, and I'm like, I can't.
I said no more small towns. I need cities and stuff. But I just remember him being like, actually making a decision, and it was like, nope, I'm not going to do this, and then having to kind of go down another path and think, what do I want to do? That's so clear. But then I also remember.
Yeah, and then our son started getting so big, and he could he was crawling out of his crib. Like, it became dangerous in an RV with a 1.5-year-old.
Yeah.
You were talking about the ages for kids to do this.
Yeah.
Like, we were at a sweet
She
spot
looked at me
with
and
a
she goes,
baby and a
I'm not doing
toddler.
homeschool with these kids.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I knew that wasn't going to be me.
Okay, sounds good.
I need a school.
We met a ton of people who do that, and that was like awesome. We met a lot of people on the road. That's their thing. But I was like, nope, it's going to be before our daughter starts preschool. And
that was the
my
other
son
thing too, is
climbing.
we were going to head up to the Northeast and do Acadia, and that was going to be like the grand thing. I'm like, but man, like when we get back, like it's going to be off. She's going to be at school, like, and I was just ready to work. I was ready to like.
You figured your stuff out too. Like we had taken the time, and I felt like you knew what the next move was, and you were content with the decision, and then I was okay with putting down roots near his family.
Okay.
And not super far from mine.
Because it feels like with making a decision like this, I mean, one thing you could go is say, hey, this is great. Let's just keep doing this forever. But even when you're like, this needs to come to an end, you're in an RV. You don't have a house.
Oh,
by the way, that was a whole
by the
other
way,
thing.
getting out of an RV and into a house is 10 times harder than getting out of a house and into
Yeah.
an RV.
That's good to know.
Then
It
we
is.
went
But
to
it just
with
feels like
my
there's so many
parents.
options then. You're like, the world, we could do anything
Yes.
and there's nothing. You're like, we're reinventing careers and we're thinking about where
Oh,
we're going to
yeah.
live and we're thinking about like the like number of options that you have at that point
Well, and
seems
it was-
overwhelming.
it
So for
was.
you, the big driver was,
but like also thrilling,
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you
I
could,
mean, maybe like, I guess if you have a sense of priority.
Yeah.
And so for you, Sean, like the career thing was a big question for you. And that was kind of like a big drive, one of the top.
yeah, I mean, I wanted,
questions.
I'm a big believer that you should never have the Sunday scaries. Like, you should always
For
be
you,
excited.
it would
Yeah,
be like
the Saturday scary
the Friday,
or the Friday
scary.
scaries.
So
But,
like before you
I
preach.
think, you're not going to go to work every day and be like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing. But like, you should look forward to it and you should feel as though you're contributing and helping others. And I think for me, it was like, I want to find something that I want to be excited about what I'm doing because, whether we like it or not, a lot of times our jobs define who we are. And in those roles, it was like, oh, she's the reporter and he's the one that works in sports, and it was such a big part of our lives. It was important, but
I will say Sean was better at like shaking it off than I was as far as, I just have to make this change and kind of figure out what I want to do. I sat back and let him do it. And I was like, okay, let him figure it out and then I'll figure it out. And the truth is I still haven't figured it out. I
Yeah.
still don't know for
I was gonna
sure.
ask.
But I got to a point where I was like, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Where our personalities, I think your natural personality shows in these kind of things and in these journeys, and we just react. I mean, what we took out of the journey was different. The way we
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that too. I mean, I'm curious just, and we can maybe get to that later, Corinne, about you talking about your sense of calling. I know for many women having babies immediately kind of shifts some things about, okay, what is my order of priority and but here we are in St. Louis now and we've heard, so I'd love to hear more about that at some point. But I'd also love just to hear about like generally, what do you learn through 10 months on the road that actually stays with you and informs how you live forever after? I'm sure you learn lots of lessons that you they come and go, but like what else sticks and what else becomes like new guiding principles for life? Like how does life look different? Or is it just kind of like, this is a fun adventure, but now we're just back?
I feel like there's a ton, right? But one that comes to mind right away that I know we implement in our lives every day, we try. My mom always used to use this saying. She'd say ETM, and it was short for enjoy the moment. So like if I was a kid and I'd be like wanting to get on to the next thing or go do something else, my mom would always just say ETM.
See, my mind is opposite. I'm like, that's estimated time of what? Like I'm like, when is it? The opposite
It
of
was
like
basically
anticipation.
her polite way of saying to me, like, just chill out,
down.
slow down. And I don't think I ever really listened to her until we were on the road and I knew what ETM really meant, enjoy the moment. Even if that just meant like sitting outside with my kids and Sean around a fire or, going for a walk around the campground. I'm not even talking
recall
about the
those
cool
moments,
hikes.
like Northern Florida. Remember that night we were sitting there and we were looking at the fire and we looked up at the star. Like there's so many of those moments that I think we got to really revel in. Like remember when we were down the Keys and the kids were being crazy and we just started walking along the coast. It's like those things that I think.
But we still do it, though.
I was going to say,
That's
are you
the difference.
Yes.
Yeah. So are you
Yes.
able to?
Yes.
Yes.
Because it's like one thing. I have transcendent moments when I'm on vacation, and I'm like, this is the stuff. This, it's like this is an epiphany. I'm going to go back to work next week, and
But it wasn't vacation. So you
wasn't
saying
vacation.
that, like it was different.
But we're better at the moments now where it's like it can be complete chaos. There can be those 2 minutes of just that beautifulness, and then the chaos for the rest of the day. And you're like, man, remember that like 2 minutes that we got to all spend outside, like doing whatever. Remember that hike that we did? Like it's just.
I think we can enjoy the moment of our daily lives now. It's not just vacation or it's not just when we're outside
great.
RVing. I think it's just Sean's just had his birthday, and I feel like just those like simple moments of the kids like making his birthday cake and being so excited to give him his birthday card. Like these little things are just such an enjoy the moment instead of, okay, let's get on with our day. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Especially at the young age too. Like the kids, impressing little kids is not, it doesn't have to be, like they just want to be around you, and they just want to be like, hey, do you want to help me cut the grass? My son who's 4 will follow me around, and he'll talk about how great it was to cut the, like, I think you have to be aware that our day-to-day lives are going to continue to happen, and there's things that we have to do, but like, you got to enjoy it along the way and not just.
And then I think the other
something
thing,
you learned, and that's stuck.
I think we
pretty
learned
well.
to enjoy the
That's
moment, and
great.
I think that one has stuck. I also think, we were very out of control a lot of times, and by that I mean the situation was not in our control, right? It was like, we have to just trust God on this. We have to have the experts come help us, when the RV would break or any situation.
These are like new experts every time.
No, everything's fixable. Like everything is fixable. Like, and I think that's.
But I like to be in control of a situation. Like that's 100% my personality. I like to know what, I'm organized. I like to know what's up. And I think the journey helped me realize that it's okay to be out of control. And he has to remind me still. It's not like I'm really good at this. But it's something that I recognized and I learned about myself on our journey. And I think that's something that I have been better at since the RV trip, is just being like, okay, this is out of my control. I just got to trust God. I just have to do it. There's no other way around it.
Yeah.
And Sean, I heard you saying everything's fixable. Is that another point of just kind of as a part of the control
things
thing?
Break, and things don't go the way that you think they're going to happen. And so, we go back to that, Proverbs, but also like, it's never as bad as you really think it is. It just, in that moment, it can be so overwhelming, whether it's, saying goodbye to your first house and watching a moving truck with all of your stuff and trying to shut, like, there were so many things along that way that it's like, yeah, it's going to be okay. Like, if you think about, for us, we have the access to so many things that most people don't. I mean, we're concerned. Right. There was a night that we were in a state park in North Carolina, and we're sitting there in the RV, and we look across the campground, and no one's in this campground, and water is shooting straight up in the air, and we're like, I wonder what that is. Water main broke. They turned the water off. And our lives were upheaved, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like, people deal with this all the time.
Right.
Or like our heater wasn't working, and like there's all these things that happen, and for me, it gave me so much more appreciation of what we have. And I think, I love the fact that, I can wake up at the same time every single day. And I think there's a greater appreciation for all the stuff we have and not the stuff that we don't have.
Yeah, especially we actually don't like a ton of stuff. I wouldn't call us like minimalists, but maybe a little, because we saw what it was like to just live with the essentials.
Yeah, and I think people have, I've been on a number of mission trips, and that's kind of like, a 10, 12-day mission trip. Like, you have that sense, and you come home, and again, I feel like it doesn't stay very long. It doesn't stick very long. So I'm curious, do you think there was like an ideal time of like a saturation point where these lessons started to really sink in? If you would have only done this for 3 months, do you think you would have come away with the same lessons, or did it require the 10 months of living with?
For us, I think we needed that whole time. And I think there were like different points of these lessons. And I mean, honestly, in some of the lessons I didn't even learn until it was over, and I looked back at it. I'm still pulling things from our adventure.
Yeah.
What's some of your biggest? I mean, like, do you have anything that you feel like changed, like a lesson that sticks with you daily?
I think it's that not reacting to something that's happening to you so instantly. Like, there were so many things on that trip that we had to change and pivot and adjust. And like, it's an adjustment. And then you just keep going forward. You can't focus on like where you are. You've got to focus on where you're going.
Yeah. Since you brought it up, why don't you share the horse proverb or the gist of it?
I'll do my best. So it's an old farmer, and he's got a horse, and the horse runs away. And the neighbors come up and they said, "Oh, how unfortunate for you." And he said, "Maybe, maybe not." And A few days later, the horse comes back and he's brought back 6 wild horses with him. And they said, "Oh, how fortunate for you." And he says, "Maybe, maybe not." And a few months later, his son was out there trying to break in one of those wild horses, and his son gets kicked off the horse and breaks his leg. And the neighbors come and they say, "Oh, how unfortunate for you that your son has broken his leg." And the old man says, "Maybe, maybe not." And a few months later, the army comes through and enlists all able bodies to go to war. But his son cannot go to war because his leg is broken. And they say, "Oh, how fortunate for you that your son," and he goes, "Maybe, maybe not." And so it just gets back to the principle, like, something's happening that's going to dictate something later on, but you just don't know.
Right.
Having a car having a fender bender, it's awful, right? It's like your whole world. You're like, "Oh my gosh, my car!" But like, did that fender bender save you from something else?
Right.
And you could drive yourself crazy thinking about it.
Yeah, and if you only believe in kind of an impersonal fate or something, that may be really scary. But if you believe in a personal, loving God who's looking out for you, that's really powerful. And I think that's what I'm learning at this point in my life. Like I've known God since I was a child, but when you said everything's fixable, like my wife and I grew up, my dad's a carpenter. He fixed everything. So I grew up kind of learning how to do that and swore I would never do any of it. I'd always hire people because I hated it. And then I realized how expensive it is to hire people. So I'm like, I need to figure out how to fix this stuff. But in the middle of a project, there'll be this moment where I get overwhelmed where I'm like, what if I make this worse? And it happened. I mean, I've done dozens, if not hundreds of little projects, everything from, plumbing that needs to be fixed to a major renovation. And there's that moment where I'm like, what if I make something worse? What if I break it? What if I should have never done this to begin with and I messed it up worse? And there's this this reaction in my brain that happens. And my wife, Jocelyn, actually has been helping me with this because she'll go, "Hey, you've been through this dozens of, not hundreds of times, and you've always made it work. You've always found a way through it. Like even if you have broken things,
it just becomes more expensive to fix it.
It's a little more money, but you always fix it. Yeah. Like you always put it back." And so for me, that's been like a thing that I've had to learn for myself. So I just don't live life with everything is so high stakes. And it's just helped me learn to trust myself more. But then that has kind of cascaded into my relationship with God. And to go, because I also have this perfectionistic idea with God, like I've got to do this right. And if I do it right, then God will bless me and my life will go well. But if I mess up, then, which is just crazy to think that way. But I'm like, no, everything is fixable and I can't fix everything, but God can. He can redeem everything. And it really is like a new way of, it's funny because like I've spoken that and I've preached that my whole career. It's like taking root in my heart in a different way where I actually can believe it's true. So I don't freak out when the horse runs away and go, "Oh my gosh, this is terrible." I'm just like, even if the horse doesn't come back, like with 6 other horses, you know what? God's at work and he's going to use all this for ultimate good. And I don't even know what that looks like. I just have to trust. Mm-hmm. And man,
there's a lot of that going on.
I think that's, if you bring the whole thing full circle, and I'm not just saying this because we're sitting here with you, but like when we were in Milwaukee, we really struggled to find a community and a church outside of our jobs. Probably because we were working so much, but like we had our friends next door and then that was really it. We didn't have a sense of community. And we went through this whole huge long journey and we came back to St. Louis and we grew up in very different atmospheres within churches. And we're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to ever find, some place that we want to be connected and plugged into our faith and make that a priority with our children.
That we'll both enjoy.
That we'll both enjoy.
Came from different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. And, again, this is not just like telling you
not just
this.
because Dion's right
Not just
here.
because Dion's here, but like, we're like, okay, let's start trying to go to churches and test them out and, try that shoe on. And I've never been someone that has a hard time making decisions. We came here and I was like, nope, that's it. And she's like, well, what do you mean? Like, and I was like, nope, that's it.
I had like a list.
We're here. I'm like, nope, we're here. I don't need to see anything else. And here we are, like sitting here telling this story to hopefully, give some of that back to other people. But like, God's hand was in this whole thing, and this is his like.
Well, I mean, I think to that point, Sean had earlier said the highs were really high and the lows were really low. And we would be on the road and it would be a low day. something would break and we're stalled and we're trying to find a place to sleep for the night. I mean, it could have something like that.
By the way, the stakes are very high when your family lives in a RV and the heat turns off or the water doesn't work.
Yeah.
So high stakes. Anyways, go ahead.
And I feel like I would just be in these lows that I just hadn't really experienced too much of before this journey. And then we would have a moment of like, oh my gosh, God is here. Like, look at that sunset. Or, oh my goodness, look out at those trees. And him and I have always said prior to this trip, we feel closest to God when we're in nature. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't think about that when we headed out, but it was those moments of just being those dark days. And then it was like, oh my goodness, like we are not doing this by ourselves. Like there he is. And he would show up in various ways. We were in Sedona for Christmas.
Ooh.
Cold. Very cold.
My parents came out.
Her parents came out and met them. And, we had the thing. And Christmas morning, I like get goosebumps thinking about this. I woke up Christmas morning to walk the dog, and I ran into her dad out walking in this campground. Those campgrounds are big. It's always something going on in campgrounds. And we look up, and it is one of the most amazing sunrises I have ever seen in my life. Like, it would bring you to tears looking across this. And you're like, remember this forever. Like, it just... And you can't miss those moments because you're so busy doing whatever.
But those are the moments we tell our kids about now. We talk because our kids don't remember it.
Right.
Kind of. Our daughter kind of thinks she remembers it because she's seen pictures and hears us talk about it, and we talk about it all the time. It's obviously a huge part of our lives and theirs. I hope they think it's cool one day, and our son. But we'll talk about those moments with the kids now, like specifics like that, and we'll show a picture and be like, look at what we were surrounded by. And it was just these reminders that it can be a hard day, but we knew we were in the place we were supposed to be. Like we were supposed to be doing that to get our lives back where we felt like they needed to go.
I mean, the other thing, I guess, just the kind of like final note on that is like, we met so many amazing, nice people along the way too. Mm-hmm. Like,
oh man, yeah.
I mean,
some of them we still keep in touch with, like through social media, especially the ones that are like still on the road. Yeah, I love it. I'm like, I can't believe you're, we
met Brad Pitt in Palm Springs from Oregon, not the Brad Pitt, but super nice guy. He's like, I'm Brad Pitt. We're like, but these people, it's such a community, and our kids are like painting rocks and for these older people, like it was just it. I think we discount the fact that people want to help. Yeah. There's situations where you're begging, you're like, please, I'm living in an RV with my family. Can you please come take a look at this thing? And like, okay, yeah. Like there was a lot of people that helped us along the way. Family, friends.
I do think we need to admit though that when we moved back here and we found a home, which by the way was like when it was hard to just find a house, that would have been 2021. We're just like, please, like help us. We don't have a home. We need a home. I think it is important to note that we sold the fifth wheel and the humongous truck, and we were like, we need to be done with this. But now, fast forward a little time.
We have a truck and a little RV now.
Yeah, and it's like the best. We love it.
You're like, we don't need to live in this thing. We just need to be.
We have a 19-foot RV that feels like moving a lawnmower around, like a lawnmower trailer around. Like it's so much less stress and so much more enjoyable.
Like, I mean,
and when it breaks, you just go home.
Yeah.
Like bringing that up, Joe. I mean, backing into a campground, I didn't know that. I wouldn't say we like fought a lot, but when
our marriage is very strong. Our marriage got very strong before that. And the like funny story with this is that we sold this RV to a couple, and
it's sad too, though.
It's sad too, but we sold this RV to a couple, and they had no RVing experience at all. Like, okay, here's the truck, here's the RV. It's all one big package, everything you need to go. No kids, 2 cats. After 3 months, they called it quits and went their separate ways.
I know. So
it's sad, but we're like, hey,
we did it.
We did it. Yeah. We sad for them, but hey, this is
no
testimony
kids.
to
Like,
our
what was
cred.
the problem? Like that.
But we like backing into some of these.
I feel the same way about putting, the IKEA trips, and when we get home and get the furniture put together. But
like same sort of thing.
Yeah,
just
totally same thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're
backing in
to the left, to the right. I'm like, I can't see you.
Yeah, there's nothing that makes me feel more inadequate
as
a like man and a human than trying to back up a trailer of any kind, and let alone
yes.
If you ever do this,
everyone just stops and watches you. You're like, can you please It's like the first tee at a golf course. I'm not a great golfer, but it's like everyone is like watching. You're like, can you just not watch me?
It's
we
great
do it
entertainment.
now.
But if you ever do this with your wife, practice with walkie-talkies before you hit the road. You're like, okay, your left, my left, your right.
Driver
stop.
left.
Like,
No, driver's side.
like push the button when you're like, okay, forget it. I'm just gonna do it myself. Like, and the kids are in the back seat and the dog's panting in your face, and you're like, I got the whole house.
Everyone's
in the back.
got to go to the bathroom.
Everyone's so
It's
eager.
just-
Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, I mean, we learned to work together. We certainly, you already know, you know the strengths and weaknesses of each other when you get married, but you really find them out when you're in that close of quarters with each other for that long.
So I wanted to go back to just where you are, Corrine, with thinking about your sense of calling. Y'all are anchored here in St. Louis now, and lots of things going well. And you alluded to just still trying to figure out.
Yeah, I think that when we moved back here and we decided to put our roots down, I was never one of those people who was like, if I'm being totally honest, I wasn't like, I want to be a stay-at-home mom. I want to take care of my kids, and that's going to be my thing. But what I learned from our journey was that it was way more important to me than I ever knew. And I remember when Sean said, look, like, you kind of have to figure that part out on your own. Like, if you want to work, I'll support that. If you don't want to work, I'll support that. Like, we'll figure it out, but that's what you have to figure out from, walking away from my job. And I think for a while I thought, okay, well, I actually used to work here. That's how we met. I used to work in St. Louis at a station in town, and it was great at the time. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just go back when we get there. But I didn't, because I knew deep down that wasn't the path that I wanted to take. I didn't want to have that kind of a commitment away from my family, but I really had to grieve my job. And I know that sounds super weird to some
It was
people.
on track to be they were moving after COVID. They were like, okay, well, if you can figure out childcare with a full-time thing, we really want to look at you at an anchor position. You're like, oh man, how do we figure that out?
You know what though? I had all sorts of different roles at all sorts of different stations. They were all wonderful for the time. And it was a station that was taking care of me, and they were considering, the family life and all that, but it didn't matter. And that's when you look back and you're like, oh my goodness, it's good we did leave, because I could have still been doing this every single day and being away from my kids. But I had to take a period of time where I had to grieve my job. And then we moved here, and the people I knew from the short time I lived here when I was younger, we were at different places in our lives. And I didn't have any friends. The only person I really knew were my in-laws. Yeah. And so it was so hard, because I am a social person by nature. I like to be around people. But I just had to be it's fine. I just had to take a step back and be it's okay for me to just not know, because I didn't. And I remember looking around at some jobs and doing different things, and it just never felt right. So I still do take care of my kids. We still have, we have a first grader and a preschooler, and I started to dabble in some freelance work, and it's wonderful. It feels good.
Yeah.
And it feels like a part of me that was missing is coming back, which feels really good. And we found community here, and I made friends here, and that's all wonderful.
You're not going to talk about the biggest thing that you have in your life right now? One of the biggest things with Momco?
Oh, I mean, I did. I ended up doing this. That's how we found Pathfinder. I joined MOPS. And I didn't even want to. That's not really my thing.
Yeah.
But a family friend was like, you should just join it.
Well, I'm so glad they rebranded, because it was horrible branding. It's Mothers of Preschoolers, MOPS. I'm
it's
say
called MOPS
to
now.
some.
But when she took on a leadership role, I had so much fun calling her the mop head.
Oh, yeah. He thought that was so funny.
I'm to a bunch of moms with young kids who are struggling to feel like they're able to take care of themselves and balance all of life. And
it's a huge commitment.
And you're like,
but the thing about Momco is that I started it because I needed community.
Yeah.
And then I joined the leadership team, and then I ended up running the group for a couple of year commitment. And I do that because I see those other moms that are in the same place that I was. It doesn't mean they left their job and traveled around the country, but they're in this weird place where it's just I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing right now, but I know that I don't want to do this by myself. Yeah. And so they find Momco, and it's a community where it doesn't even mean you have to make your best friend there, but there's women who are supporting other women and they just get it. And I think for me, like that was a saving moment, was finding that group and being like, oh my goodness, I am not alone. Not everybody can relate to what I just went through and where I came from, but they know what it's like to make a huge change and have a change happen in your life, whether it's just, adding a child or whatever it is. So that's been huge for me. And I still have a bit more of a commitment with that. And then we'll see what's next. Like, it's been really fun to dabble in some different opportunities.
I think that, I found that to be such a healthy and refreshing attitude. There's so much judgment about saying, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing right now. My oldest just graduated from college early. So she's a little bit out of sync with just some other, like graduate in December. She's not going straight on to work. She wants to do grad school. And one of the questions people were asking, like, okay, so now what? Now what? And she thinks she knows. And I see in her this incredible pressure to say, this is what I'm doing next. And I'm trying to insert a little bit of like, yeah, perhaps, or maybe. This is because I feel like it's okay. She's 21. She's not even 22 yet. And she's trying to figure out her next step. But I also see it in women who have kids and, make a decision. But I see it about like guys at different points in their career too, who are just like, I don't know. Like maybe I do have, what'd you call it? The Sunday scaries.
Where you're like,
But I think it's okay for it to change too. You know? Like as we
in the
change
sense
and
that
as
it's
we
changing.
grow, like it's okay to look at something that you've done your whole life and be like, this doesn't fulfill me anymore, or this isn't bringing joy. I need to go figure out what's going to bring me joy, because you could just stay in that position for the rest of your life. And what kind of life is that? I mean, it's not a whole life if you're.
We always tell people it's not like you have to quit your job or like,
we're on an extreme.
Sell your house before you have the next move. Situated. We're always like, no, like maybe figure it out, but figure it out. Don't just sit there.
And change is okay.
So it's people who
it's scary, but it's okay.
Figured it out or figuring it out through some, and I guess that's helpful that you're still figuring it out. But it's people who kind of went through a more extreme, drastic way, arguably crazy. I still kind of like it.
Says the guy that gets in a cold plunge every morning. Yeah.
Y'all figured out it out that way. So when you say to people, "Hey, you don't have to do this extreme thing," as people are wrestling with the sense of calling, because like you said, Sean, I mean, I think sometimes we can have a sense this part of my life is coming to an end, and I don't know what's next, and that's a little scary. And I can admit that it seems like this season is ending and a new one's beginning, but I'm not sure what that is. But do you have any other than doing what you did? Have you given any advice or counsel to people that
I feel like I have told people to make a move. Like you've got to do something. And sometimes, I can probably come across even harsh just saying that, because everybody's like, it's easier.
But what if it's the wrong move? Everything's fixable.
What if it's
so my favorite, actually we haven't done this. Kareen has probably heard my saying of we'll figure it out like 10,000 times. Because like, what are we going to like? We'll figure it out. And I think like you just figure it out. Like we'll figure it out.
But you can't just stay put if you know it's not working.
Yeah, some people may say, "Oh, but you guys, maybe you're the kind of people who can figure stuff out. You're, extra resourceful or handy or something." Like, but I can't figure it out. Like, do you think it's universal that pretty much anyone can make a move and you can figure it out? Are people more capable than they think?
I think if you're motivated and if you can see like. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's personality wise. It's you're also like relying on your faith to say like if you're in a situation where you're unhappy, like it might not need to be like you sell your house and do all these other things, but like do something and see if that makes you happy. And if that doesn't make you happy, then try something different. And the hard thing is now as you get older, that gets harder and harder. It's like, I've got kids in college and I've got to provide and do all these things. And that's where it is. The real world comes hard when you're like, well, I can't just like quit my job and start a band.
Look, it would have been easier for us to just stay where we were in many ways and just keep doing what we were doing. But I feel like if you can look at your situation and think, okay, you have to admit maybe you will have to make some sacrifices, right? Like, I mean, obviously I stopped working, so that was my outlet, my identity to some extent, unfortunately at the time. And a paycheck too. I mean, all of it. Like you have to think, okay, can I make some sacrifices to figure out what's really going to make me happy and what's going to make me feel whole? And we did. Both of us made sacrifices in different ways. And I think that's what people don't do a lot of times. They're like, well, I'm not willing to give up this to get this.
Because for me, one of the most terrifying feelings is the feeling of regret. Like when you have that sense of like, I had something and I mismanaged it, or I let it go, or I sold it and I never should have. There's this looking back. So how did you deal with regret? And how do you deal with regret? Like, I'm sure when you're sitting there and you have no heat and you're like,
what do you
we had that beautiful house in a nice.
I don't ever
have it.
You don't have it. And maybe that's a fault or a strength of mine, but like I've always been someone that just looks forward and is like, okay, like that's the next. I'm always the next thing, and that's not great. But it's also like I don't dwell on what's happened because, like, what is it? You can't change it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any regrets about what we've done at all.
Did you have moments of regret where you had to kind of overcome it?
I think
while we were on the road.
Yeah.
Or even now,
here in St.
so
Louis,
something I regret from the road is that I was so focused on making sure that everything was okay for my family, and to an extent, like you have to, when like
you missed out on some of the moments.
I missed on some of the moments. Like there was some moments where I was so fixated on trying to fix something. I'm saying like everything's fixable. Like I was so hyper focused on fixing something so that the kids could have showers that night or whatever it was. And we didn't buy a junker. It's just like there was times where I remember we were in Florida and our electricity stopped working, and she drove around in the truck with the kids for 4 hours. Now you got to go by the beach, but it's still hard to have 2 kids in 100-degree weather while I'm sitting there in an RV trying to get a technician to come and help me fix things. I missed out on that time, but I guess some of it was necessary, some of it wasn't.
I think I regret about the journey is probably just not recognizing sooner that just admitting like this is hard in my motherhood journey. I was like, okay with this and that and what we were doing and, being isolated from everybody else. And I was okay with so much of it that I think I pushed out until we were done, that this was like weird for me to just be by myself with my kids. And I should have just admitted that. And I think that if I would have voiced that to Sean earlier on and probably told my mom, like, Mom, this is really hard just being with these kids, that I could have gotten some advice and encouragement from people around me, where I think I was kind of like, no, this is like what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right,
when he's taking care of the RV, I'm supposed to be doing this and it's supposed to be
Everything's
okay.
supposed to be great if
right.
I'm
Right. But as far as regrets, I think like you asked us earlier some of the things we learned, and I think that's something we had to learn, is that there are no regrets. Big regrets as far as the choices we made to do this huge.
I mean, there was a couple campgrounds I wish we would have kept driving by. Some of them, like you're booking,
right?
When you book a hotel for a vacation, you're like, man, I hope it's okay. Yeah. Like we did that for 10 months.
Yeah.
You pull up someplace, you're like, wow, this place is really great. Can we stay here forever? And they're like, nope, sorry. And then you pull up to someplace and you're like, close the shades. Let's just go to bed. We're leaving tomorrow.
So after it's all said and done, you feel like life, this is all about wholeness and pursuing a whole life. So you went on this great adventure, but now you're back to, you're back into life in the more conventional way that most of us are trying to live life. And so do you feel like you're bringing a healthier perspective, a healthier sense of self, a healthier family culture into life with you now than before?
I think the way we make decisions is just different. We're like, anything we do, any big decisions, it's like, well, what do we want this to look and feel like? And, we don't have it all figured out.
Yeah.
It's not like this was like, we're done with our RV journey. You tie a bow on the top and we're like, awesome. It wasn't like that. We didn't think it was going to be like that either. But I think the way we make decisions is different because we're better at seeing what we need as a family unit and what's right and wrong for us. I think I try not to judge people and their decisions as much because sometimes you are like, why would they do that? And then you're like, you know what? That is their thing. And they think that that's right for them. I just can appreciate people making decisions, I think, too, and making those changes where maybe before I wouldn't have been like that quite as much. But we're still figuring it out.
Yeah, well, and it feels like once you do something drastic like this, and you reorient your life, and you realize life can be okay that way. Life was not perfect before, but it was okay in Wisconsin, and then life wasn't perfect, but it was okay in an RV. And you're like here, and you're like, hey, there's actually lots of ways to live a life that's good and happy. I would imagine some of that would sink in rather than being so, we've lived in this house, I've had this job. Like, does life exist outside of the way we've been doing it? Because I feel like for me, there is this sense of just being so, this part of my work in the last couple of years, just being so like locked into this vision of what my life should look like or what I want it to look like, that then if something feels like it's starting to threaten that vision, I get panicky, and then I go like, wait a minute. Like, especially as we're getting our kids raised, which feels really good. For me and Jocelyn, I'm like, we're not high maintenance people. We could actually be happy 100 different ways. Life could look very different, around us. Circumstances could be different, and we could be happy. We could make a good life that way. And that's a really freeing feeling. But I imagine that the longer you're kind of, for everybody else, the longer you're baked into a way of life or a vision of life, the scarier it seems to be. Like, we can't divert from this. Otherwise, there is no happiness outside of this life, or we might have chronic regret. But what you all did is you kind of tried on a whole different way of living. You're like, oh, life goes on and life can be good and we can make a good life.
I think some people just wait to do these drastic changes, like whether it's retirement.
I don't want to wait until I'm like, I can't do all. I mean, it's physically challenging too to do all of that.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's right.
I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait.
Though.
I think you wait. I think people wait to do that and make those changes or explore those things. Like, I mean, we've both said like, man, someday we're gonna do this without the kids, and it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah,
like,
right.
And because we saw so many campgrounds where we'd pull up and they'd be like the old couple sitting there, and they'd be grilling and it'd be nice and calm, and our RV would be shaking. We're like, get in the bath and do the food, and you're like, oh, imagine what that's gonna be like. But I just don't wait, like and I think. We got another little RV because we missed that. And the intentional nature of time, our kids aren't going to want to do that with us for that much. Like, I mean, hopefully a little bit longer, but like, there's a lot of stuff going on when you're in life. And if you can just step outside of that for the weekend, whether it's going camping or whether it's getting away or whether it's turning off the electronics or whether it's just like quieting everything else and just making sure that you protect that time.
It is hard for people to get out of their bubble and their typical schedule. But it feels like so good when you can. And so I don't know, I don't know if that's a personality thing. I don't know if that's because people just need a push. But I mean, doesn't have to be this crazy huge change like us, but people need to be open to making a change to feel that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That brings me back to the question that I started with is that I sometimes wrestle. I'm like, is life as we do it, or maybe it's just my life, my personal life, is life so driven by these things that aren't actually healthy, and I'm trying to pack in healthy things around the way. Do I have to do something drastic, or is it made up into incremental things? You all did something drastic. You learned some practices through that, some new thoughts, some new ways to approach life. That then, and even saying, hey, we miss having an RV. This was a helpful practice for us to recenter ourselves from the craziness of life. But through it all, how would you answer that question? I mean, like, is modern life, because I've struggled with this, is modern life just so messed up the way like my in-laws, whom I love, they bought me like a little grounding mat thing, because it's supposed to be good.
Wait, does it have all the spikes in it?
No, but I've got another one of those, acupressure mat.
Yep.
My wife looked at me. She's like, you're going to do one more thing to cause yourself pain.
She goes, you're like pain. And I was like, my brain's going so much that it just calms it. But I, to your point, like looking at things and saying, okay, is this healthy? Is this not healthy? Like, it's okay to like let go of some of those healthier things, but also you're never going to do it perfect. Yeah. So like if you're doing the best that you can and you're trying, to me, I think that's more important than just not trying, well, at least you care.
And it looks different for everybody too. I feel like what that whole life is, it looks so different for everybody. And I think what we would have said 5 years ago, our answer would have been totally different than what it is now too.
And maybe that's part of it is, God is a creative God, and we've talked about God as a very not you and I, but just over time we've talked about God as a very like formulaic, precise God. But God is, I mean, you look around at creation, and the Psalms say that the heavens declare the glory of God. The creation is screaming out to us something about God. And you look at what God does in creation, and I always say this, like, he didn't make just even one kind of mountain. Mountains look different, and they're different colors, and they're certainly not one kind of animal, and some of them are absurd looking. And you just see God in this creativity. And I think what feels scary about that is accepting that God is creatively writing a story for me, that there is no template for it. This is creative work, and I have to engage with him, and I get to co-create to figure out what that life looks like. But I think sometimes we're so conformist in the way that we live, that we're kind of looking for what is the model, what is the template that's going to guarantee me to have a noble, good, godly, enjoyable life. And someone just give me that template. And I think the work is a lot harder and it's scarier because it's like, no, but it's also really freeing. No, just you get to create that with God, and he's gonna do that with you. But you've got to maybe take some risks and do something.
Do something. Take a risk. Make
I'm trying to think what that would be in my life. Like, we've lived in the same
change.
House. I've worked in the same place, same house for 16 years.
But you're thinking of all these big things.
But it doesn't have to be big. And like, if it's bringing you joy, whatever it is that you're doing.
So my cold plunge, if it brings me joy sometimes,
making you happy.
Doing the
That's
joy
why I'm
thing.
fine
and
with
use my
his
pokey mat, my
crazy
acupressure
keep
mat.
doing the joy things. And like, everyone's definition of a drastic change and happiness is different. I mean, some people's idea of, freedom is traveling the world and going all these places and some people's vision is having a cabin and sitting on the porch and just relaxing. And I think we compare them, but it really has to be like what is for you and what is making you happy.
I think you have to, it might be easier to say what you're not happy with if you take a look at your life and you're like, okay, like this isn't working. So
for you, it was clear the work schedules of not having
work-life
time and
balance,
the grind
as we call it.
Yeah.
The work-life
no
balance was totally off. But I feel like somebody else might look at their life and think, okay, like this isn't working. That's when you make the change to get rid of that or to make it better, whatever it is. I think that might be an easier place to start.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
than just like, I'm going to sell my house and see what happens.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch
maybe
jobs.
that's not the
Don't
issue.
switch jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you guys thought about consulting, taking on clients to help them figure this stuff out?
No, because we don't have it figured out. We're figuring it out as we go. And, we did something drastic and crazy and it was right for us. Probably not right for everybody.
Yeah.
But I would say that don't do we would love to do that someday for the rest of your life. Because who's to say that we'll get to do that again someday? You don't know.
Yeah. And I feel that, just that delayed, I think because I see it so often. I mean, I see people who retire and they've got these big plans and someone gets chronically ill or someone dies and they're like, we had this plan and we were waiting for, and sometimes in life you got to save up before you can, get the house to buy there's a responsible way to chase after your goals.
Sometimes people look at this and they're like, well, we can't just go travel for
You remember
a year.
back in COVID when everyone was paying crazy, ridiculous prices for houses?
Yeah.
We sold our
Opportunity.
house.
Yeah.
So we were able to
and a house
do
that you
it,
had worked hard and, had been grinding away at careers to be able to buy, and then you sell your house. So you're making sacrifices.
And, we could have, we were going through this whole thing and we had to do, I'll explain that. We couldn't just go buy a huge motorhome. We had to get what was right for us in that moment that fit not just those next 10 months, but you could spend millions of dollars on an RV and it would have been great. But
financially smart.
But it had to be a financially smart decision because we knew that it wasn't going to be forever. And, you want to talk about a place that you can compare yourself to people really quick. You pull into an RV park and there are people there that, live there, and there are people that are passing through there that have motorhomes that cost more than what anyone makes in a lifetime.
It's kind of like owning a boat too. Like you're out on a big body of water, and you're like,
yes,
but whoa, you got
so there's just a lot of different people that are doing it, and that's the thing too is that you don't. Everybody can do it. You just have to make it happen.
Yeah.
If that's what's
so
good.
you can do something. You can make a change. You can do it responsibly. You can do it. You don't
You
have
just
to.
have to do it.
You just
So
have to
many
do
people
something.
talk about it. They're doers and they're sayers, as my mom used to say to me. And it's like, just do it.
Yeah.
Figure out a way, as Sean would say, right?
And you've got a good and loving God who's with you and he's for you and he's going to help you along the way, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else that you think people should know? Anything else you want to say? Anything else they didn't let you say that you're...
I mean,
you're
it was
like,
the
oh.
best. Just the journey itself, getting to see how people live.
How many states have our kids been to?
I think we did 17 states for the trip, or 19. I can't remember, 17 or 19.
I got a map.
But the actual experience of getting to go, and truthfully, my old job, I got to see how people lived, like the poorest of the poor, the wealthiest of the wealthiest, different places. I got to meet all the people. I felt like before we set out, I'd seen a lot, but I hadn't. Like getting in an RV and driving and stopping in all those places and getting to really see how our country lives, it was so awesome. Like that was so cool. I don't think there's any other way to see that except the way we did it. I really think that was a unique thing that we will always have. And we can pretty much talk to anybody about any place because we're like, oh yeah, we were there, which is really fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to think like if
And I
anything
wouldn't
else
have
to just
picked
add.
St. Louis if I was just going to pick a location. But man, we really have a great.
I went to school in Denver. I lived in Phoenix. I was like, I'm not going back there. And then I came back here for grad school and I was like, okay, I'll stick around for a little bit. And then like, I got an amazing job and I was like, okay, like they're probably moving to LA. So like, we'll stick around. And then I was like, well, let's go to Milwaukee. And like, I'm not going back to St. Louis. Like, and then we're back here.
And it was like, why not though? I actually love it. I think it's a great place to raise a family. I think it's, I think we can
wish we
appreciate.
were closer to the mountains, but yeah.
Yes, but we have great hills.
Yes.
hilly.
It's hilly.
Very hilly.
I think we can appreciate that Missouri is like way cooler than some people might think.
Yes. And amen.
It is. We're happy. I mean, we're happy, and we had to do some things to get to where we are to make that, that excitement again. But like, you just got to be excited about what you're doing every day.
Yeah.
And I think that's what ultimately I would say the biggest takeaway is just, that saying, like, live the life you love and love the life you live. Like, just do it.
So you have the Sunday scaries. That's a warning sign. Do something. Do something. Don't just be a victim of your life. Don't wait forever either to change something in the hopes that someday you'll have the ability to just do what you can to change it. Anything else? Any summary words?
I think we are so much happier now than we were before. It's not like we were miserable before.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there were days, but
Yeah.
it's unbelievable when we look back and we're like, oh my goodness, like the time we spent together now it's so weird actually to have them like we're around for holidays. And
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just appreciating
crazy.
things that you think you become out of touch with those. Like, we could never go to church on Sundays.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the main reasons why we fell out of our faith in Milwaukee is because we worked,
Yeah.
and like holidays were, we're coming in for 4 hours and then we're leaving, and birthdays, well, I can't make that birthday, and weddings. And like, I think all of the things, I said it a little bit, like, I love the fact that on Saturday mornings, most mornings when there's not a soccer game or go to, like, you can have a cup of coffee at your own house,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Things I take for granted, but you're right.
yeah,
That's,
you can, I mean, I jokingly say,
special.
like, I can go to bed and wake up same time every single day, not, in different cities and crazy stuff. It's fun, but it wasn't fulfilling anymore. So,
Well, thank you both for sharing your story. And if there are any other young moms with kind of preschool age children, you'd recommend Momco, even though you were
Yes.
not initially like...
no, I mean, it's great. Momco's a great outlet. And I feel like action teams, like I'm here to say, it's another way to connect. Connection's huge. And it also might be the thing that people are missing in their whole life is just like the people, that's a big deal.
I've accidentally ended up on multiple action teams that I didn't know were action teams, and that's like I've like played soccer for like 4 games.
You're like, I
"This
just
is an
played
action
soccer."
team?" And I was like, I was camping, I was on a fan. Like it's so important.
Yeah.
That sense, and it's easy to say, oh, I don't have time, but like we're so much happier here because of the sense of community that we have.
Yeah, whole life action teams, for those who are in St. Louis area, they're available for you, and they're groups of people who get together to grow in an aspect of the whole life. But the togetherness thing, the connection thing, is a big part of it. You need to get a cold plunging one. It'd be a little logistically challenging to.
I don't know. This time
I
you
feel
probably
like
just
you
go to
guys could
Creveport
make
Lake.
it happen. Yeah.
I don't know if I want to get in the water there. Well, hey, thank you both for your time. Thanks for sharing your journey. And as the rest of you are moving forward on your whole life journey, just do something. Sunday scaries, don't tolerate that. Just do something and keep moving forward in your pursuit. God bless.